Séamus Boland from County Offaly is the new president of the European Economic and Social Committee. He's somebody I've known for many, many years through his involvement in Rural Link, and he's with me for this special podcast. Séamus, congratulations firstly on your appointment.
Thanks, Ciaran, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you. As you said, I have known you for quite a while. I'll just tell the good points if that's all right, but you're an excellent broadcaster and obviously proving to be quite a successful MEP.
Well, let's focus on yourself firstly. I know a little of your background, but you have a significant rural background and farming as well.
Look, I ended up where I am because at the tender age of 13 I discovered I had to stay at home. My father wasn't well, and I think I was going for different things. I was one of those annoying people that love school. But suddenly I was at home on the farm, and a lot of my life has been on the farm. I still live and work the farm. I'm afraid it's rather a hobby more than anything else, but still it's a commercial farm, and that's where I am.
I suppose straight away with the hard question, is it the type of farm that will survive under CAP and other measures coming down the line in agriculture?
I think it has survived a mixture. The reality is the farm I have is typical of farms in Ireland and indeed in Europe, across the whole continent. Yes, they will survive, provided, and every time the CAP has been renewed, there's a problem, provided we don't lose why we have CAP, and provided we remember farmers need basic support, whether it's for the environment or for the production of food. It will survive in that context, but if some of the statements I'm hearing are true, then yes, we're in trouble.
Because you hear, from County Offaly, from Westmeath, from right across the Midlands, the number of suckler herds is going down. People are leaving the business.
Yes, that is a cyclical thing. Like, since I started farming, I've been in pigs. They died a big death in the 80s with the credit squeeze. So every enterprise suffers a great deal. So the suckler, I think, will come back now because prices are massive. There's a real bubble in beef farming at the moment. And already on the ground, I'm hearing of people getting back into suckling. So that part of it I don't worry too much about. But the reality is the income generated through farming alone is not sustainable unless it's supported through CAP.
How much is the Midlands reliant on agriculture from your perspective? I get up and make the speeches here and I talk about jobs being lost if we don't support specific areas. But really, from your experience, how much is Offaly, how much is the Midlands really reliant on that single farm payment or agriculture in general?
Pretty much up to 100%. Frankly. And as you know, coming from the Midlands, and you come there for yourself, the Midlands had two big enterprises, agriculture and the peatlands. The peatlands has, as you know, gone, but farming is still very much part of it. Yes, people have part-time jobs, etc., and without the part-time jobs, you won't survive. But in terms of the CAP and the check for individual farmers, it's pretty much 100%.
You mentioned in your ambitions for the future period now when you're going to be the boss of the EESC that poverty and dealing with poverty is going to be a priority. I have to say, after 12 months in this Parliament, it's not a word I hear every day or every week in the European Parliament.
Well, they're going to hear it from me. I said in my speech last week, I am going to get to know the Parliament. I'm going to meet those who matter in the Parliament, and they won't know why I hate them. And they won't know why I hate them because the reality is there is something like over 20 million people in Europe, that's in the EU alone, below the poverty line. The reality is, in rural parts, again, I'm quoting the CSO and the various think tanks who measured this stuff. In Ireland, we have quite a percentage, up to 15% of people in rural areas below the poverty line. That's a lot of people. And the reality also is we forget that. And in designing the CAP and in designing Just Transition and designing all these programs, we forget that people who can't afford them are the people who should be involved in them. So poverty is a real issue because of my own experience and because we have quietly forgot about it, but it hasn't, to quote another phrase, it hasn't gone away.
So you're coming into us in the Parliament, you're going to be in our face for the coming years, But what are the key measures that we can actually do something about with regard to poverty in this Parliament? As you say, an awful lot of talk about strategy and policy and issues down the line, but sometimes the Commission will turn around and say to us, or the Parliament will turn around and say, these are member state issues. At the end of the day, these are issues that you have to work out in your own country.
Well, yes, and of course I will accept that they are member state issues, but President van der Leyen has inserted into her own work plan an anti-poverty strategy. That tells me that at least on paper there is a seriousness about tackling poverty, and I was very glad to welcome that, because in my previous role here in the committee as president of Group 3, we made poverty a major issue, so much so that we're glad to see it in her work plan. But the EU cannot deny that it doesn't exist. It does exist. And you cannot impose or develop strategies unless you acknowledge it. So the first thing I'll be asking the parliamentarians to do is, first of all, will you please acknowledge that is an issue? And that issue has to be solved. Otherwise, strategies to do whatever you want won't work. Simply won't work.
When people contact me and poverty is on the agenda, fuel poverty is mentioned quite a lot. That's what I hear it. And of course, the cost of living. And in recent weeks, I've seen it week after week. In fact, I spoke on it in the plenary in Strasbourg recently. People in smaller business just cannot pay the electricity bills anymore. And as a result, they're being pushed into different situations. They're going to have to sacrifice something, and they're going to have to walk away from something. In some cases, it might be a small business. We had a situation in Kildare town where one family ran a restaurant cafe for years, gave it up, even though she worked morning, noon and night. A woman I know in the engineering sector talked about the ESB bills going from €2,500 a month to €10,000 a month. Yeah. And the question people ask me is, why is the Commission not doing something about this? What can we do about this?
Well, let's go back to basics. The point is, as you're now outlining, poverty exists, not just among families, and let's face it, they are the first sufferers, but it's affecting businesses. And, you know, in rural Ireland, and indeed regional Ireland, which is closer to the suburbs of the cities, poverty affects small businesses. It affects a whole range of people. In Irish Link, we did a study which says because of transport alone, it costs €100 per week more to live than the counterparts in suburbia. So that's a big issue. And the EESC, we have produced a number of fuel poverty opinions, which we would like much more action on, which all recommend that, first of all, can the Commission please acknowledge that transport is contributing to poverty? And can we acknowledge that we need to minimise and ring fence the kind of taxes collected, for example, carbon tax, and make it redistributed among those people who
So
have
let's
no
break that
choice to
down.
pay.
You were talking about somebody who lives in the Midlands,
Yes.
in Offaly, Westmeath, but their job is in Dublin. And they have to travel and commute and pay every day. And that's taking a chunk out of their wages.
Absolutely.
And makes it more difficult to put something on the table to eat at the end of the week.
And the thing is, they've no choice. And the thing is, people give out to rural families, for example, oh, what are you doing with 2 cars? Do they know anything about family life? You have one of the partners will probably, maybe both will probably be working, you know. One of them will probably be trying to ferry the kids left, right and centre. So you need another car. You need another car to go to work. So an awful lot of income is spent on keeping the car going. Now, there is no choice. You know, you can't book a bus at the end of the road. I know Local Link do a lot of good work. Irish Rural Link set up that back in the day, but it's not there everywhere. It's not everywhere. And anyway, the percentage for that budget is still too small. So the reality is poverty is reinforced sometimes by measures supposedly for the good of everybody, but they're not for the good of people who have to pay it.
So the critical question, and we get this in the neck all the time. So you made the speech. I've heard yours. I've delivered it myself. I spoke in the Parliament in the last 6 months about visiting Navan in County Meath, where the Vincent de Paul told me about this. Households with the 2 people are working, both partners are working, and they're turning to St Vincent de Paul to help them pay the rent.
Yeah.
Which is extraordinary.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do about it? What should the parliamentarians like me be doing about it? What can the European Economic and Social Committee do about it?
Well, the Economic and Social Committee have and will be much more involved under my presidency in terms of producing, first of all, opinions. What we do, just for your listeners and people viewing this, is we produce opinions which are supposed to and are directed to influence the Commission and indeed the other institutions in terms of the legislation they pass. So, for example, we would like to think the parliamentarians will look at the opinions and read them and take some of the recommendations. Same with the Commission. What do we want to do, though, is very simple. Build in a poverty-proofing mechanism. The poverty-proofing mechanism means that every strategy you propose has to go through the poverty-proofing. And does it work or does it not? So if you introduce, like for example, if you put carbon tax through a poverty-proofing mechanism, you'd immediately come up, and it's not me saying this, ESRI in Ireland saying it, other institutions around Europe are saying it, it disadvantages people who are dependent on a car and don't have another alternative. So a proper poverty-proofing message should be there.
But isn't this the problem with the place? I mean, I know what you're saying. I did a report myself on just transition, which is just a file. It's just an opinion. They tell me similarly that when and if there's future legislation, the Commission will look at that file, they'll listen to your opinion, and they'll take it on board. But we're only one member of 27 member states, and the chances of us changing the opinion might be difficult. I mean, you know, in terms of the carbon tax, the support in terms of decarbonisation across Europe, the Green Deal has led to where we are, and it's legislation, and it's been followed by all the countries, despite your opinion and other opinions.
And indeed, the Green Deal. Frankly, I would support the principles around the Green Deal. That might be strange coming from a rural person, but I would. But what we have said, and what I am also making part of the heart of my statement in terms of EESC, is we bring civil society to the heart of Europe. Now, if the Commission want to ignore you, the parliamentarians, want to ignore civil society, then would ever just stand up and say so, because that's a major admission that you don't care about what ordinary people think. And this is not about worrying about what the various far rights, far lefts, or any other far away people think. It's about ordinary families. Ordinary families, and that's why farmers were in that square in Brussels just last year, because they were not being listened to. So I suppose, Ciaran, if the Commission are doing what you're saying they're doing, they don't want to listen, they don't want to hear what we're saying, then they'll pay an enormous price. Because politically, Europe could become very toxic. So they need to start listening to you. You're the people who voted for you, and they need to start listening to civil society people who support me.
The people of Ireland would say they haven't been listening to our opposition to the Mercosur trade deal. Yet, when you walk around the corridors here, you find a lot of countries who are in favour of the Mercosur trade deal. Is it simply a case then of us being in the minority and taking our beating? Is it that simple?
Here's my controversial views, if you don't mind, about Mercosur. First of all, I can see why Mercosur is good for Europe. I think anybody can see that. It is good for Europe. It brings a number of countries, trading bloc in South America, into line with Europe, and they can enhance Europe's wealth, etc. That's fine. That we agree with. What we don't agree in terms of Mercosur, and this I think Irish leaders need to adopt a certain strategy here. I think it's going to happen. That might be bad news to you and maybe to me as well.
Well, it hasn't happened yet, so we live in hope.
But it's very likely to happen because it is in the overall interest of Europe. What we need to do, and those of us who oppose it, is to now get a much better deal than that's on the table. And the deal that's on the table is not great, to say the least.
It's the same deal that was there the last time. There's no major change.
It's no great improvement. There was something announced
since Big Phil Hogan put it on the table 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. Now they tried. Last week there was something about improving it. But the reality here is, even if you agreed with their view, which I don't, by the way, that this is a good deal, then you hear on the side corridors, oh, by the way, we're going to merge MFF with CAP, or we're going to reduce the CAP budget. So even if that deal was a good one. The reality is it's going to be diluted by policies coming up the track in a few months' time. So what I would like to think, and I would like to see the energies of those of us who oppose it, is to demand written, very serious commitments that I don't hear coming, that we support Mercosur, but unless there's very clear commitments, because I think I'm saying our opposition should just be subtly different, demanding real action, because if it goes through without us and without us getting what we want, then we've all lost, and I don't think that's in the interest of us.
I think I agree to some extent, but the problem is that people like me who stand up in the Parliament and stand up in the committees and look for an improvement to the deal are not being listened to. I mean, even when it came to the safeguards, which came out last week, and we talk about different alarm bells that will go off at different times to ensure that the trade can't collapse by 10%, for instance. We wait 3 or 4 days and we ask the Commissioner and we ask the Parliament, can we discuss this? And then overnight we're told, well, actually, we don't have to come back to you on this. It's a trade matter. It can go straight to the Council of Ministers and they will deal with the matter. So they bypassed the MEPs and that caused a lot of dissatisfaction among my voters, I can tell you that. I was there to help put in safeguards on traceability in Brazil, on Department of Agriculture inspectors on the ground, all the sort of things the people in Ireland want to see. Then I've been told, sorry, it's a trade matter. We don't need you on this. We go to the Council of Ministers.
Well, then, first of all, the EESC, just to be clear, we produced a number of opinions in Mercosur, and like you, we've put in very clear binding measures which say, yeah, go ahead with it, but if you are prepared to support farmers and other entities who are losing out. The Commission clearly, and here's the question, and we're going to something fundamental here, is how democratic is the EESC or is the EU? And let's be blunt about that. I'm a believer in Europe. I always have been, and I'm not ashamed to say so. But I would like more accountability, especially in matters like this. So if they're deciding not to listen to us, Ciaran, then they are creating the deficit of democracy which exists.
This is the problem, that I'm like you. Someone asked me in an interview this morning, are you pro-Europe? I said, I am pro-Europe, but that doesn't mean I'm pro-European Commission.
Yeah.
I said, because these are the people that I get most flack about in this job. And I see evidence on the ground of some of the criticism is fair. My colleague Michael Fitzmaurice in the Dáil regularly goes into this rant, and he knows, I agree with most of it, that sometimes the European Commission, faceless people seem to make decisions and go on with these decisions, never face a vote any place, and will steer the policy and steer it into place despite our best efforts. And there's evidence when you look around the building to support that in some cases. So to me it's dangerous, because what it will do is what you said a few moments ago. If the general public says, well, they're not listening anymore, they're going to push on with this anyway, the cynics will get in here, and then you have something like Brexit down the road.
Yeah, and Europe, I said last week, is very vulnerable to criticism from the various dictatorships around, because we disagree so much, and you have 27 member states, and then you have the Commission coming up with one view, you have the Parliament coming up with another, and you have a whole lot of not listening. And remember, Ciaran, farmers will be very angry about this, not just in Ireland, but across Europe. And when they turned up in the square in the time of the year in January, when you were getting farmers to a local meeting in that time of the year with the breeding season in, winter at its highest, that meant huge anger. Now, if they are not listening, just even to the farmers alone here, then Europe is in serious trouble, and I think they really have to get their act together. Mercosur, yes, going back to my statement a while back, we love doing things for the common good. We forget that somebody pays a major price for the common good, and farmers should not be asked to pay that price alone. Not alone.
I think I agree with you. But again, my experience in a year in here is that, you have an ambition that you'll have a poverty proofing of all policies. I was told when I came in the very first day that all policies are proofed. and they're rural proofed. This was a great phrase that came in the first day. And then I was told that there'll be an assessment of Mercosur from the perspective of the economy of Ireland. And the Department of the Trade in Ireland did it about 5 years ago, back in 1999. I asked for a new one to be done after COVID. I've been repeatedly ignored. I've asked the Minister for Agriculture, I asked the Taoiseach, the Minister for Trade, I asked the committees, I asked the Commissioner in committee, and I've just been ignored. They said there's a greater economic report available, which shows it's a winner for Europe. And your country's economic assessment is not important. Now, that's hard to take and will be very difficult for voters to listen to as well.
Well, look, I've read the analysis. I've really tried hard. I've read some of the analysis that they have put forward. But as I said, it doesn't stand up, and that's the problem. And I'm working with Irish Ruling for the last 20 or more years. We do analysis all the time, and look, we do our best to be objective. And our objective analysis is that there is not enough secure measures to protect farmers and rural areas in Ireland and in Europe there. And you can talk all about who's winners or losers, but if those secure measures are not proofed, guaranteed and underwritten, so that no matter what happens, there is an automatic adjustment. Sorry, it's not going to work. So that's where the democratic deficit is going to. When farmers turn up in Luxembourg Place again, and they will, then people will be wondering, how did that happen? Well, you and me, and certainly me, is saying this is why it's going to happen if you're not listening.
I want to turn to housing for a moment. It is central to some of the work I'm doing here at the moment, and it's obviously central to the issue of poverty as well. We have huge issues right across Europe, we know that. We have significant issues in Ireland, lack of houses in the first instance, just physically not being built, and then lack of affordable houses, a bigger issue in cities. In other words, we can't afford them. I took my own nephew who has been trying to buy a house in Dublin recently and has failed, just could not afford anything that was coming up, and has this week bought a house in Kinnegad in County Westmeath. So travelling from Longford to Dublin, it's going to save him probably an hour a day in terms of transport. It's a solution, but it's not the solution that he would have hoped for in the first instance. This is happening all over the Midlands. We have people who cannot live beside their workplace and are commuting daily. And what can be done about it? What's your views on it?
My views are, again, I can talk about my own kids in the same space, struggling to get the necessary housing, etc., and commuting. I said last week that, and having met Mr. Costa, from ex-Prime Minister of Portugal, who is the President of the European Council, and it was refreshing to hear his view on housing. But I did say we have to treat housing as an emergency in the way we treated COVID. That means no long-term 20-year plans to be brought in to solve the problem, because your nephew and my children, 20 years is no good to them. And young people are looking at this, and I'm talking about young people up to 40 years of age, with no hope of getting a house. So that means we do need state intervention. We do need an abolition or a change of the state aids, and Europe can do a lot there. Yeah. Because the state aids are part of the problem. We have a European Investment Bank we need to use more of, and we need to use more of the skills and training, because part of the problem in Ireland is actual building skills. But we need to treat it as an emergency. And really, until we do, we should stop talking about it, because we're not going to solve it.
There are some indications that both the Irish government and the European Parliament are going to do something. And this is critical from my perspective in terms of the state aid, to explain to people how that works out. At the moment, your Offaly County Council can't really engage with private builders to build housing schemes, because it's allegedly interfering with competition law. Yeah. I think that's one of the areas where they feel they're going to relax the state aid rules. So these partnerships can happen, or happen more frequently, shall we say. And therefore, if usually a builder will operate with a county council, will want to operate with a county council, will do business, and we might get more houses built. Would that be fair?
I think it's a fair assumption, but it's not enough, Ciaran. It's not enough. Even the language you're using there, that the Offaly County Council would relax or the regulations would be somehow relaxed. That's not enough. We need to go a lot further. We need to make it very clear that councils will engage with private builders without any conditions. We need to make sure that the money available is available properly, not just some funny mechanism through the European Central Bank or the European Investment Bank. It needs to be available. We need to do a whole load of legislation on the way we provide land, make land available. Some of that may be sensitive to people who, in the Constitution, etc. But the reality is, there's thousands and thousands of people in the Midlands, in Ireland, who are going to go into their old age in rented accommodation, and that is serious poverty for them for the whole of their lives.
This is the problem. We've gone around the Midlands over the last 8 months during the Housing Committee's work, and I went to Navan, to Naas, to Dundalk, to Tullamore, and more recently down to Ballina and to Galway. And the words in my ears as I drove through the countryside were coming from one of our best known builders, from the Flynn builders in Cork. And he came here to our committee at my invitation, and he said, firstly, get a map of Ireland, look where the water or the wastewater is in place, then rezone that land to build the houses. That's it. Simple as. Is it that simple?
It's probably not that simple, but it's close. But as I said, when you create a proper emergency situation, you should follow that with the legislation needed to solve it, like in the next 5 years maximum. That means it gives some hope for the younger people listening to this podcast, wondering what these two are talking about and wondering what the hell can they offer. Well, the only thing, if you're in below 40 and you still haven't got your home, you expect this to be solved very fast. Now, it could be as simple as that, but in declaring it an emergency across Europe, which I think Mr. Costa wants to do, then you at least show that you're trying to solve it now in as quick a time as possible. Now, if it's not done, Ciaran, we can talk all about plans and all of that. They're never going to happen.
I suppose the Government of Ireland, we're going to see a lot happening in the House in terms of policy in the next few weeks. We're going to see the Government of Ireland says they are going to bring in emergency legislation. So let's see what it is.
Good.
In terms of doing it. The naysayers are saying there'll be a constitutional challenge, and as you just said it, property is protected under the Constitution, and they'll go to court, and that'll stop it. This is what the cynics would say, and the likes of John Collins and others are saying we have a state that won't allow us to do anything anymore, or European governments. It's difficult to deny that sometimes. What I say to people is what will make a real difference in the shortest term, in the shortest possible term. What would make a real difference? We've had some successful efforts at supporting people, for instance, the area of derelict homes. Derelict houses. There's a scheme in Ireland, 50 grand, 75 grand in a rural area, and it's working. It's on a small base. It's only about 8,000 in the country. But it seems to me it's stuff like that we can turn around quickly. We should go after. Most of those don't even need planning permission. There was something there before. And to me, we should be extending put it up to 100 grand. Make sure it's a first-time buyer or a person who hasn't had a house that goes into that house. Let them sell it or rent it at the end of the day. Short-term measures are badly needed. Short-term
measures, and this is where Mr. Flynn could well be right. I mean, there's a lot of zone land around the place that's just lying idle. It's either waiting planning permission, or it's waiting something, it's waiting finance, it's waiting... There's always something. There's always barriers there to making it happen. And I'm sorry, I mean, this is what a government is supposed to solve. They are the ones in power. If there's barriers stopping the housing, they have to legislate and, if necessary, hold a referendum. Because, frankly, there are thousands and thousands of people listening to this podcast who cannot hope to own a house or even get a social affordable house, never mind whatever type of house they want. And if politicians and leaders who are in power, in government, cannot see that, then they will be turfed out, and they deserve to be turfed out.
Do you agree with one of the Stripe brothers, the entrepreneurs, when he says the system is so bad now that it won't let politicians do anything quickly overnight, any place, in Europe or in Ireland?
Yeah, I read Mr. Collison's very interesting and I would call excellent article. That's where I disagree with him. That's really where I disagree with him. if the system has got so much on top of politicians that it stops them from doing what they're elected to do, then we have a bigger problem than any of us thought. We elect politicians. We elect them into power. That means they're supposed to do stuff when they're in power. If you're telling me that when they get in there, they can't do anything because of some indivisible or invisible legislative
sometimes it's not
government.
invisible, sometimes it's very clear.
Well, even worse.
You can put a stream of reasons in front of a minister and they don't seem to have the courage to take on the civil servant or the advisor, and instead they say, no, we could have a potential legal challenge, we could have a financial issue from Brussels, and they just throw their hand. I mean, we don't seem to have the conviction that you saw in your youth and I saw in my youth in politicians. Doesn't seem to be there in terms of our government at the moment, or indeed in Europe for that matter either.
Well, that's what worries me a great deal, and my argument is this is an excuse for politicians, whether they're in Ireland or anywhere else, not to do work, and when they are not prepared to do stuff, then frankly we have a major failure of our system, and we're on a road to pretty much anarchy. We're seeing a little bits of traces of that anarchy around the place that I don't like, and I'm challenging politicians. The next time you stand in front of a press conference or in the Dáil or in European Parliament for that matter and start saying, well, we can't do this because, my argument is, well, if you can't do it, who will?
Yeah.
And frankly, the Constitution says you're the elected government, so do it.
Because we're playing into the hands of the cynics and to the naysayers. You keep telling farmers you can't do this for nitrates, you can't do this for fodder, you can't do this for fertilizer. You're on dangerous ground. Eventually, you're going to say, why are we in Europe at all?
I always give the analogy of a farmer, and sometimes the animals I tend won't do what I want them to do. So I can spend the whole day running after them in the field, trying to force them. But you know what? If you encourage them with a bucket of feed or something, you'll be amazed what they'll do. So my argument is, when you're told you can't do it, you resist. And we in Irish Rural Link in Ireland, we've a number of pilot successfully, and you know some of them, projects for the environment. I saw farmers change from being militant against to being militant for. Why? Because they had a say in how the thing was designed, they had a say in how it was managed, and they could tweak it when, you know. So this thing that farmers or anyone else has been told what they can't do, I'm sorry, find ways of persuading them.
Get up and get stuck in. A couple of minutes left, and I'm going to ask you a few personal questions. The other side of the man himself, in terms of your likes and dislikes and your own activities. Favourite music? How about that for an opener? How about favourite entertainer or musician? What would you say when it comes in there?
Well, look, I had a lovely piece of music composed, Irish contemporary music, for my inauguration, which is, I do like Irish music. Maybe less the diddly eye, although I love it, especially in a Cayley or that. But I also love, some of the great operas, and, I still love some of the classic. Very eclectic in my taste. And of course, in my youth club days, the normal pop songs, Sugar, Sugar and all of that were popular. And when I hear them, there's a lovely record, Cherish the Night. Who's it? Cool in the Gang, I think.
You're showing your age now.
It was released when my first child was born. Yes. And every time I hear it, there's a tear in my eye. So, yeah, I can listen to most
What's the favourite food of the new president of the European Economic and Social Committee?
At the moment, you'll hate to hear this, given the discussion we've just had, because I'm changing my system. Greens.
Oh, we're going green. Oh, my God. That's a resignation issue straight away. He's in trouble, folks.
I thought you'd love that. You can make a few press releases on that.
You're trying to lose a few pounds, I imagine.
I'm certainly trying to do that, yeah. But I like. Problem is, when you say what kind of food do you like, I just like food.
Full stop. And sport. Need I ask a man from the Midlands and County Offaly what's your favourite sport?
Well, okay, obviously I follow the Gaelic football and hurling, probably Gaelic football, but I played soccer all over the Midlands in my younger days, and
Which club?
enjoyed it. Knockone near Tullamore was probably the one I played most for. I played for Ballycumber eventually near the end of my days, and a couple of other random, but it was very much a hobby. But we loved travelling around the Midlands. I mean, by the way, when you played soccer in those days, the field was usually managed by the cattle. So the first thing the two teams had to do was get a shovel and lift the cow paths. So yeah, love all.
They were good days.
Love all sport.
Listen, we've been talking for over half an hour. It's been a great opportunity to do it. I genuinely congratulate you on your election as president of the European Economic and Social Committee. I made a point last week of ringing you before you got the chain because I wanted to make sure you hadn't changed dramatically afterwards. I'm glad you haven't. You're still the man that did great work for the Irish Midlands, not just through Link, but through various organisations. I wish you well.
Thank you.
And I hope you maintain the attitude of can do, because that's something that I find sometimes hard to do in this Parliament. I like to get a win and to achieve something. We're doing some, but we're not doing enough. And your evidence, I suppose, that you have to keep going, keep trying.
You need patience in this game. I'm afraid I'm a long time in it, and patience, but you have to keep after what you can do, and frankly the excuses are what they are, to be removed. Excuses are something that should be removed as quick as possible.
Well, I'll take that advice to heart. Séamus Boland, President of the European Economic and Social Committee, thank you for joining us on this special podcast.
It's been a pleasure.